So I think we're recording. Does it show it on your end that it's recording? There should be like a little.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
Okay.
Just let you know. Okay, cool.
Cool.
And do you like Raymundo or Ray? What do you prefer?
Ray is fine.
Ray's
Yeah.
fine.
hmm
All right. Well,
Unless you want to
everyone.
use Raymundo.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I guess it sounds more professional, but whatever.
Well, I'll tell you initially what I thought of
Yeah.
whenever I heard Raymundo. So everyone, welcome Raymundo Ray to the Spiritual Nomad podcast. And Raymundo, I'm going to use Raymundo for a little bit at least because,
Sure. Sure.
all right, before I even give you any introduction of how you ended up on the show, I was obsessed with Rocket Power when I was a kid. You know that
Yeah.
show?
Yeah. Yeah. I know
And their
Raymundo.
dad's name was Raymundo. The kids would always be like, Raymundo. And so as soon as I saw your name in the direct messages, I was like, yes, Raymundo. This is so awesome.
We got Rocket Power in here.
Yeah. Dude,
Yeah, I
my
love that
kids
show.
I've reintroduced them, not reintroduced, introduced them to Rocket Power, and rewatching these shows is like
Are they on
brilliant.
Netflix or something? Where are you getting that?
Nickelodeon has like their own sort of channel, kind of like a
Oh,
Disney
okay.
Plus, but for
Oh,
like Nickelodeon.
wow. I didn't know that.
Right, yeah.
Cool.
So it's pretty cool. Well, friends, as I said, Raimundo's on the show talking about really responding to a post that I put out, inviting people to have a conversation about faith, about how that has taken some sort of formation in their life, maybe has been through some sort of reformation or deconstruction or reevaluation, and what that really looks like today. And so my hope with all of these conversations coming up is that we would be able to resonate with people who are having a similar experience, going on a similar journey, maybe people that are not that it's necessarily a race, but maybe someone that might be a little steps ahead of the curve from where we've been, so we can know what path is clear. We can understand our own self, we can reach back to others and help people understand and make sense of what sort of faith looks like post, you know, some of the earlier versions of it. So it's kind of a random way of explaining all of it. But Raymundo, thanks for responding to the post and jumping on the podcast and being the first one to do this. So you're
Yeah.
brave,
Thanks for
man.
having me.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your history, your life growing up, where it was Christianity or faith of any sort. I guess that's a major assumption.
Mhm.
Was that a part of your life, or is that something you found later in life?
I would say I was born into it. My both my parents are actually certified pastors.
Yeah.
So since birth, I grew up pretty much at church. I spent more time at church than I did at home for the earlier parts.
Yeah.
Simply because. So I was born in Monterrey, Mexico, and my dad was pretty much fresh pastor there, and a a Baptist church actually in North Carolina asked him to start a Hispanic community church up here in the States.
Really?
Yeah. And
What
so
denomination was that with?
so that church was Baptist. But my dad's church is Assemblies of God,
Okay.
so more Pentecostal.
Yeah.
But for the moment, it didn't really matter. They just wanted some kind of church up here for the Hispanic community because that was back in '93.
Okay.
There was like small town, so like almost like zero Hispanic churches up there,
Yeah.
or where I am now, actually.
Where are you at now?
Um, it's in Asheville, North Carolina.
You're in Asheville?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I love Asheville,
Oh, you've
man.
been?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been to
Nice.
Asheville. So rad.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
So
What brought you there? It's a small town.
yeah, I mean, not to, sidestep too much, but I moved here from Indianapolis, Indiana,
Mm.
and that's where I spent most of my life. And my dad and I took a motorcycle ride down through the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Oh,
So the
oh,
first day
amazing.
was Indianapolis to Asheville, and then we took off from Asheville and jumped on the Blue Ridge and worked our
Oh,
way over
that's the
through.
best experience of Asheville for sure.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
man. So
Yeah.
amazing. So you're in Asheville. How old were
Yeah.
you when you made it to Asheville then?
So I was born and like 2 years later they moved to Asheville. So I was like 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And since then, them starting a church, trying to organize everything. My mom and dad were the worship team. My dad was the only pastor at that time. So my mom was actually teaching English for the people of their church.
Mm.
And so like really all my time was just spent at church. And so I was heavily indoctrinated there.
Yeah.
And
What was
I
that
wasn't,
like? Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say I wasn't, at that moment, I wasn't mad or anything about it. I actually really enjoyed being with my family, being at church, being with the church family. So it was actually a really cool upbringing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel a lot of similar ways too, like being born into the church as a pastor's kid, like,
Mhm.
um, it's a unique thing. Like it's a really a roll of the dice, what sort of experience kids get. And I think it has to do a
Yeah.
lot with like personality and temperament and even like parenting, like how your parents parent you as being pastors or in ministry in some way.
Hmm.
That really defines a lot of the early years of your perspective. Cause I realized, um, I was getting, and certain people do absolutely have church trauma and stuff. But some of the things that I was frustrated with 5 years ago, I realized wasn't really truly trauma. It was just my own sort of like, personal preferences that weren't there.
Yeah.
But I'm with you in that like, my earliest memories of church aren't bad or traumatic or, you
Hmm.
know, feeling like I was, like I spoke at a pastor's kids lunch like years ago whenever I was a youth pastor. And like the stories that I heard was like, that's like child labor, man. Like, like it was bad. I was like, I didn't have that experience at all.
Wow.
So
That's
with
good.
you, I'm curious, like, you enjoyed it. You enjoyed the community. Like you appreciated some of the culture that was there. Um,
Hmm.
what were some of the things that you felt like were, and I know I grew up in like a charismatic church setting, and so not too far from, our origins come from the Pentecostal movement,
Hmm.
Azusa
Yeah.
Street and everything.
Yeah.
And so that's where we, as the Vineyard Church movement, like find
Hmm.
our history back. We're like third wave charismatic, whatever. So I think some of the things that I look back on as being like indoctrinated by more of a Pentecostal theology, if you will,
Hmm.
is were you ever like pressured into things like speaking in tongues or doing some of that stuff from an early age? Like what was that experience like with theology mixed in?
Yeah. Um, so my parents, thankfully, were genuine in their faith. They weren't looking so much for a certain look for themselves or for their church. They just wanted a genuine experience with God.
Yeah.
For them, that also included all the spiritual aspects of it. And I was taught that the spiritual aspects, like speaking in tongues and all of that, were evidence of a relationship with God.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was pressured on me to do all that. It was expected, being like I was the pastor's kid, and how come I'm not as spiritual as everybody else? I should be the most spiritual,
Yeah.
being the kid of the pastor who's teaching all this. Um, so yeah, yeah. To answer the question, definitely a lot of pressure, especially just being, I guess, a face of the church.
Yeah.
Being the family that founded the church for sure.
Yeah. How was
Yeah.
that? Like, I certainly have my experience of being like the pressure of being the pastor's kid or
Yeah.
being random places and people knowing me that I don't know them. And that was a
All the
really,
time. Yeah.
yeah. How weird is that? Like,
Man, especially not only because I'm the pastor's kid, but also because my dad is an influential person in the Hispanic community in Asheville.
okay.
So like outside of religion, people know him as well,
Right.
because we help with a lot of legal stuff too, with immigration and all that.
Yeah.
So all everywhere I go, man, they know me. I'm like, I don't know who you are.
Isn't that wild? Like, I remember some of the
Yeah,
earliest memories of like being able to go to the mall with my friends for the first time by myself, like
yeah,
12 or 13, and people like coming up to me like at the mall, and I'm like, I have no idea who you are, or being
yeah.
like, like, like sneaking outside and like smoking cigarettes, and my parents like getting on to me about it because somebody from the
Right.
church, like,
Someone's gonna know.
it's
Yeah.
like through the grapevine. It's like, geez, I can't do anything, man,
Yeah. No, no,
so
even now, like I'm 29, going on 30, and they're okay with me drinking. Like they know I drink, and but they still don't want me to be seen drinking because
yeah.
it reflects on them. And I was like, oh man, it's so much.
It's so funny how that is too for pastors' kids in particular. I can't speak for
Mhm.
anybody else because that's all I'm a pastor's kid. So from my
Right.
experience, but whenever I started doing Spiritual Nomad back in 2017, it was shortly after we moved to San Diego to plant a church, and that didn't work out. And, went through a bunch of depression and all of this stuff, and then started the Spiritual Nomad podcast because that's where I was at. I was just trying to figure out, like, what do I really believe? What do I really think? If
Mhm.
I'm not going to be a pastor, like, who am I really,
Yeah.
And, but I remember posting some podcasts, just riffing by myself, exploring curiosity and all of this. And my dad called me one day and really started, like, we had a few different conversations where he heard through the grapevine that, like, I was doing a podcast and listened to it. And it's funny, like what you just said, because is exactly what he said to me. He says, what you say out there affects what happens here, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's too much. Like, like
Right.
I'm like, that's too much for me, Like, I don't, how am I affecting some church, But then I don't know. I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, that's true. I mean, I'd only been gone for, a year or whatever. And I was supposed to take that church over. So people are still, following my every move,
Wow. Yeah.
But, that sort of weight and feeling, I almost feel like, and I don't know, for me, like, I tend to always spin things to be positive, So
Mhm.
like maybe I have experienced some sort of um, low level of, trauma from those things. Like, I don't feel like I can speak freely, or because I
Mhm.
feel like whatever I say is going to affect other people, or I don't want to make other people stumble, or,
Right.
that's such a hard thing to do, and trying to deconstruct while being an influential person when you didn't even want to be. I didn't even know that I was influencing, you
Yeah.
know, what was happening back there in the conversations on staff back at church. I had no idea. Um, but you have to try to work through some of that. And I'm still trying to feel the freedom to talk about things that I really want to say,
Okay.
because you're feel held accountable and responsible. So I'm
Yeah.
curious for you, like, as you started to enter into, did you go through like what you would label like a deconstruction or like a rethinking of faith? Like, was that a defined time in your life?
Yeah, for sure. And I think actually one of the main reasons that even happened or even started as early in life as it did for me was that I knew the back end of church.
Yeah.
Because people think, church is this ultra spiritual place where God is, but it's a business.
Yeah.
Like you want people to come in and you want them to use your services and you want them to give you money, and it's okay. Without the offerings, the churches won't exist. I get that, but I saw the not just in my dad's church, and they're not perfect, but I also worked in other churches growing up, and they all have a nasty, nasty underbelly
Mm,
that's motivated more on greed. And seeing all of that made me really, really question what this was all about.
mm,
Like if the church, the reason Christianity exists is that dirty, what is this all about? If religion is founded on that, then is any of it true? You
right.
know,
Yeah. How old
um,
were you when you started like thinking through that?
early teens, just getting out of high school.
Really?
Yeah, started thinking for myself. Science and all of that, all the contradictions between that and the Bible,
Yeah.
that didn't help as well. And then just seeing other people that weren't like me, like Christian, and seeing how their own faith path and traditions um, made them be good people.
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
they didn't need Jesus
Yeah.
to be good. And then just seeing bad Christians as well.
Mm.
Like if Jesus is the way, how come you're not like at least as good as the other traditions?
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of questions. And do you know the Enneagram?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a nine, strong wing eight. Very passionate.
Yeah.
And at that point, the passion became more angry,
Mm.
and very, really full of doubt.
Yeah.
And so that made me crash pretty hard in what would be deconstructing,
Yeah.
almost to the point. Well, I guess just straight up to the point of atheism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Were you working like with a church or at a church through all of that? Like, what did your relationship with the church look like as you followed
mhm.
that path more into deconstruction?
So there was a connection only with my dad's church because it was just family, and I knew that my parents weren't going to understand what was happening,
Yeah.
and so I kept it a secret, and I put on a facade, a persona that wasn't really me around other Christians. One, to just simply to protect my parents,
Yeah.
because people find out, oh, this pastor's son's an atheist now. What does that say about him? Like he
That,
can't keep his house
yes.
in order.
Yes. Yes. That's
What's up
exact.
with
I
that?
get it. Yes.
Yeah. So I faked it, because of the politics of the situation. And then later on in life, I became less angry.
Hmm.
The anger faded, and I started to include my past and what I've learned into my future. And I was able to then continue to work for a church, even if I didn't agree with all of it.
Yeah.
I knew that there was some good with it, and it's really all I knew in life. And so I didn't know where else to turn. So I stayed in church for the community aspect of it,
Yeah.
and just to try and heal some of that hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that? So I know for a lot of people, they go through a sort of deconstruction and they can't even approach church. Like I have a friend who I was working at a Disciples of Christ church and down the street, and no longer working there. But whenever I was working there, I invited him to come, and even just coming in and somebody handing him a program was just like, I can't do this, and he's like a seminary
Yeah.
trained person or whatever. Like, how much time did you need outside of the church before you felt comfortable, like coming back into a space like that to reorient your faith and tap on some of those earlier ideas?
A long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because I actually tried my hardest to not even return.
Yeah.
I think that was a chapter in my life in which I didn't want to go back to for a while. I can't tell you how many years that would be. Over four for
Yeah.
sure. Of just trying to deal with what was happening. And I mean, it's very recent, that I could now talk about it, which is why I accepted. Oh, not accepted. I asked, to talk
Yeah.
with you. But like I would say a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been in a position in where I could talk about it and not just bash
Yeah.
religion.
Yeah.
And so, but now I'm in a place in which I think it's helpful to see religion not as this. It's definitely manipulative,
Hmm.
but I think the people that are doing that don't even know what they're doing,
Yeah.
and the compassion aspect of reconstructing is very important in not
Mm.
only how you interact with other Christians, but also in your own health, so that you're not always just this senile, angry person all the time when it comes
Yeah.
to anything spiritual.
Yeah.
Because as much as I don't want to be spiritual, like we all are.
Yes.
It's just
Yeah.
part of being human.
Was there a level of, and I'm just speaking for myself here, no
Mhm.
projection, I guess I should reframe that. I felt a level of surrender that had to happen in a way that I never knew before, to
Mm-hmm.
start to really take the Jesus narrative back into my functioning spiritual life again. Like there was a level of,
Mm-hmm.
because I, like you, like venturing into more of the science aspect of things, really understanding the underbelly, being a pastor's kid, looking
Mm-hmm.
at that, knowing who my dad is. He's great man, but he's also a great CEO, too. And,
Right.
seeing a lot of that and how that works. And frankly, just the relational fallout and the holes in the scriptures, and, the trying to reason with people who still hold like all of
Mm-hmm.
that. I was like, I don't want to approach that at all. Like that just seems like such a buzzkill to whatever new is happening in my life right now. Like
Yeah.
I don't want that in any way, shape, or form, but then revisiting that, like I felt myself, like I'd feel like tension in my heart. I'm like, why do I feel this?
Mm-hmm.
Toward like, why do I feel like this sort of like angst, towards these words that I'm reading that are good words. Like, I
Right.
revisit the gospel now. I'm like, this is like, there's beauty in this, but like, and it was a level of like surrendering to whatever was trying to protect myself, from
Mm-hmm.
what I know is associated with associating these words. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Completely.
Um, and it's like, oh man, like I start talking like this again, like, you know, I'm gonna have all this old culture that I just got rid of resurface. How am I gonna handle that?
Yeah.
Um, so like with revisiting that, what were some of the things that um like that transition, however long a period of
Mhm.
time that was, that transition of being angst and frustrated and seeing the holes in the whole thing, like what was that internal process of moving from that place into where you're at now?
Yeah. No, that's actually a really funny point because, like you said, there's all these pretty much just vocabulary words that we use in the church, and I hated those after my deconstruction. And like you said, like you find yourself using them again. Um, and I use all of the spiritual words today, but every single one of them means something completely different than what it did
Yeah.
back in the day. And so I can have conversations with Christians who have not deconstructed and have a peaceful conversation because we're using similar language.
Yeah.
Um, I knowing full well that they don't understand what I'm saying, but that that builds a bridge between me and them,
Yeah.
and that allows that relationship to start. They then trust what
Mm.
I'm saying because we're using similar language, and but that's when we introduce new not I guess yeah new ideas of what these words actually mean, using the teachings of Jesus to prove why I now think
Yes.
why what I do. And I think Jesus was the reason why I came back to Jesus.
Yeah.
Reading his words in Scripture, in the Gospels, without having throwing away all preconceived notions of what I was told to believe. I
Yeah.
threw all that away because at that point I was atheist. I didn't believe any of that.
Right.
Um, and so now reading the gospel a second time with that new lens of of just I guess logic of like his words make sense.
Yeah.
Like with take away theology, his words make sense on a social level.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I think Christians, at least conservative Christians or non-deconstructed or whatever you want to call it, are missing are missing that beauty of
Yeah.
what he's trying to say, and to to just disregard them and not talk to them um, is an injustice in my opinion. Like
Hmm.
I have what I believe to be true, and I think it's only fair to try my best to communicate that with other Christians and help them see that.
Hmm. That's a certain level of self understanding yourself, though, and trusting
Mm-hmm.
yourself in order. Because what I've seen, and I'm by no means picking on anyone, but people avoid that because they are they're scared that they might get, broken again, or they might be hurt again, or,
Yeah.
there's a level of self-independence, spiritual independence. I would even argue spiritual maturity that has
Hmm.
to happen before we enter back into those conversations, and to say that someone may not be mature for that yet is not a derogatory statement. It's just a reality of where they're
Yeah.
at. I don't fault my son for, not being able to, write all the letters yet. He's 5,
Hmm.
so it's okay.
Yeah.
And so I think that what I hear you saying is you've entered a certain level, a certain, what seems to be true with people that I have this conversation with, and why it interests me so much is there's a level of letting go. It's this paradox. It's this level of
Hmm.
letting go of the self that's going to be offended, but it's
Right.
also a understanding of the true self that's going to be able to stand on something and not be shaken by the person who is, frustrated or angry because, you know, you made a notion that could it be maybe that God doesn't send anyone to hell, like, could it be, like, and frankly, a lot of people just aren't as far in that sort of new maturity place to handle those conversations.
Yeah, no, and to your point, like the best Bible conversations I've ever had in my life, I would say like 90% of them or more would be with atheists
Yeah.
because ironically, they have read the Bible.
Yeah.
And that's just sad. But most Christians I talk to that aren't progressive in any way, they haven't. And so they don't know what they really believe. And
Right.
that uncertainty brings fear.
Hmm.
And so when they talk to someone who sounds like they know what they're saying, like me or an atheist, they feel that fear, and then they get angry because
Yeah.
anger comes from that. Um,
Yeah. It's trying
and
to
so
protect. Yeah.
exactly. And when it comes to something as insane as what happens to you after you die, if that's what religion is to you, then of course you're going to be scared if doubt comes into your mind about any of that.
Right.
And so I can't stress enough, um, me reading the Bible and reading Jesus's words helped in deconstructing even more,
Mm.
um, alongside the doubt. But what Jesus was saying isn't at all what I was taught. You
Yeah.
know, everything that he said pretty much had to do with what's happening now instead of
Yeah.
what's happening in the future. And I just people don't read the Bible.
Right.
They go to church and they hear the pastor read his Bible and they hear what he has to say about scripture, but they don't take the time to do it. And I understand, work, kids,
Hmm.
life. It's hard to get into this really, really deep book in any
Yeah.
meaningful way. And the last thing we want to do is study. We have Netflix and all that. I get it, but if you're going to be, and this is probably me getting a little upset, a little rant.
Hey, let
Um,
it out, buddy. I love it.
but like, if you're going to be that serious of a Christian, if you say, "Oh, I follow Christ, I go to church every Sunday," do the work.
Yeah.
Like read the book, do the homework, before you start criticizing other people for what they believe
Yeah.
when they have read the books, when they have done deep studies. Um, and but I get it though. I feel I have compassion for those people as well. And
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard, but I have.
It's hard, but I mean, we're scared of what we don't know too,
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. And what I hear you saying, what I agree with is if you get to know things more, you're less scared of them. And that's like,
Hmm.
that goes across the board. That's like psychology 101. Like if you are scared of people who are Muslim, the best thing that you can do is sit down and have dinner with a Muslim. Like,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
once you begin to know and have some sort of non-mystery about this person,
Hmm.
there's a level of knowing and trust and a different perspective of what that could be. In the same way with religion, um,
Hmm.
like probably much like you growing up, you're taught every other religion is wrong, bad, evil, demonic, seeks wickedness and evil
Right.
at every turn, right? And the worst thing is, like a statue of a Buddha, and see, these are the
Oh, yeah.
carved images that people worship, and it's like, whenever I took a deep dive into Eastern religions, I'm like, that is not at all what's happening here. Like,
Mhm.
even in Hinduism and things, like, people are largely aware that these are images of deity. These aren't really the deities, you know what I mean? And
Exactly.
but we're taught, like, whenever Paul walks in, I think it was Athens, and he's like, to an unknown god, that little idol, whatever, and he's like, this is the living, everybody's like thinking that all these other religions are so like barbaric in that way, but it's not that at
Mhm.
all. But it's because they just don't know. They've not taken the time with an
Exactly.
unbiased, non-judgmental curiosity into these things. And
Mhm.
so I think that, like, reconstruction or first and foremost deconstruction, I think, um, lends itself to some sort of curiosity and permission to seek something and to not watch Netflix and to read. Because I think and I'm rambling, but
You're good.
people that I have these conversations with that even do consider themselves conservative evangelical Christians, when they feel a level of comfort with me, they do end up sharing things that are non-orthodox. And
Nice.
they do end up, like, admitting to things that sometimes, not all the time, admitting to things that are taboo. Like, I had a
Mhm.
conversation with a guy, and finally he felt comfortable enough with me, because I'm a church planter. We're working to start a church right now, and so I'm meeting with people, and a guy who's a part of, like, the Calvary Chapel churches, and he's very, very Bible. He's freshly following Jesus over the past couple of years, and so he's pretty on that on fire stage, likes to use a lot of big theological terms,
Mhm.
stuff that used to really irk me, but I'm cool with it now. We get talking in this conversation, and he ends up alluding to basically universalism, and he's like, nobody at my church, like, so it was this doorway, and we had this hour conversation, and he's like, dude, I would be so proselytized for saying any of this at my church, and it's like,
Yeah.
really, people want to be curious. People want to explore. I think in the heart of our being, we are children that want to be explored,
Mhm.
and we want to look and seek and have the freedom to do that without fear of what may or may not happen to us. It's this self-preservation that creates that sort of fear, in my
Mhm.
opinion. So I'm curious for you, like, um, I hope we're doing okay on time too, but are you okay on time?
Oh, yeah, I have all day. You're
Okay.
good.
Um, so, like, as you have entered into some of those conversations in your regard, like, how is those early conversations, what was your heart signaling to you? And then also, what were some of, like, the common themes that you were beginning to bring up as, like, using Jesus words for justification for, like, what were some of the early things that you were almost helping people enter into a different sort of knowing? Does that make sense?
Let me try and clarify. So conversations with like conversations as me having had reconstructed with people who haven't
Yeah, yeah. What
deconstructed.
what has that been
Okay.
experience been like for you? Like,
Oh man, it's a test in patience for sure.
yeah.
um, but also it helps me understand who I am and in my faith as well. I think a huge teacher in growing up is talking to children,
Hmm.
um, because they're so simple minded, and if you can explain things to them, then you know what you're saying,
Yeah.
pretty much. And I see young conservatives or like young people in their faith as like the children of deconstruction. And if oh no, hold on, I have my Mac on Do Not Disturb, and I still got a phone
N-
call. It's
No
weird.
worries.
Oh, the screen got small. I don't know how to resize it. Oh, there we go. Oh, no. I lost you.
Oh, okay.
I can hear you, but your face is gone. Back to meeting. Oh, there you are. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, I'm new to Zoom here.
Dude, me too. I was like, I'm definitely was resisting Zoom in many ways.
Yeah, no, me
But
too. I hate being mainstream, but here we are.
I know, right? But hey, it enables like people in North Carolina
Yeah,
and California to have a conversation, you
yeah.
know?
I like it
So,
now. I like it
yeah,
now.
yeah.
um, but yeah, like I was saying, patience, and I feel for what was happening back in the first century with Jesus and with Paul, especially him trying to convince Orthodox Jews the ways of Jesus, and him
Mm,
trying to convince Orthodox patriotic Romans the ways of Jesus, and Jesus trying to convince capitalist, not capitalistic, but these power structures, whether it be in religion or in politics, his way of selflessness, and trying to convince people that their way of thinking is inaccurate. Like, um, I'm talking about the Bible, and so are you, but I see it differently.
hmm
How do I go about convincing you, educating you in my way, in a way that isn't that doesn't close them off,
hmm
or offend them, so that they stop listening, in the same way that Jesus was talking about the same Torah that the Pharisees were,
Yeah.
but they went about it two different ways. And that's where I find myself like, I agree with you. I do like Jesus. I do like what's happening here, but I think it needs to change slightly. I
Yeah.
think the motivation, and I think that's the key, is that the motivation of what we believe needs to change. So
Mm,
for instance, it used to be, I believe in Jesus because, and only because, I want something specific after I die,
mm,
you know? And that mentality keeps people where they are and keeps them from evolving into anything else, because straying from that means, in their belief, they're going to hell. And so I understand their resistance to my conversation. And so I find myself constantly trying to focus their attention of what Jesus is saying, as to what's happening on earth today. Likewise, what was happening in his time during his ministry. He was always focused on helping individuals during their suffering before they died.
yeah.
Right? Um, John 3:16. Um, John 3 John 3:16 was the verse that actually started my, or just like launched me into deconstruction.
Really.
Yeah,
Talk
because
more about that.
um, there's a dichotomy in that verse, whether you're either perishing or you're not.
Mm,
Right? There's no in between in that verse. But the way that I was taught and that most Christians see it today is, right now we're in the in between state. We are neither perishing nor have eternal life.
mhm,
In the future, we will decide either or.
mm,
But that gives a third option of in between, and that's
mm,
not what John 3:16 gives us. We have two options, not three.
mm.
So in the current moment, we are either perishing, or we either also have eternal life,
Yeah.
one or the other, but starting right now,
Yes.
not some point in the future. And so that changes everything about what that verse is saying. We are not going to perish later, in the same way that we're not going to, at least what I believe, we're not going to find eternal life later.
Right.
This is an option that we have to pick right now. And another interesting fact that no one really teaches is that Jesus isn't saying this to himself or as a general teaching. He's talking face to face
Yeah.
with, I think, is it Nicodemus?
Nicodemus. Yes.
Face to face. And why would he tell him I think it's so funny. Believe in me, or perish. Like, what kind of faith requires someone to believe? Like, if you told me to believe in you,
Right.
there's no faith required for me to do that because I know you exist because you're right here in front of me or on the
Yeah.
screen, right? There's no faith required in that. And so, also, was Jesus telling him to believe in his existence?
Mm.
Obviously not. He's
Right.
right in front of him saying these
Right.
words. Obviously, the Pharisees who didn't believe Jesus also believed Jesus
Hmm.
existed, right? Even go as far as to say, if you believe in Satan, um, Satan also believes Jesus exists.
Right.
So does Satan have eternal life? Like, believing in the existence of Jesus isn't what was being said in John 3:16,
Right.
right? Is believe, if you go down to John 3:36, is equated to obeying Jesus.
Right.
So if you obey his teachings and how to live and treat others, how to live in a society in which everyone, especially the least fortunate, thrive, then you will experience this life that he's talking about. And if
The
you
abundant
don't,
life. Yes.
yeah, and if you don't, then obviously the only other solution is that we all perish here,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so
And
that
you live a
all of
life
that,
of perishing. You live a
yeah,
life that is unfulfilled, that is self-seeking, that only ends in your own
mhm.
personal ruin, you
Yeah,
know?
inwardly, but also outwardly,
Both.
like
Yes.
physically, emotionally, yeah, you're gonna perish. But physically, if everyone lives like that, we're gonna destroy ourselves.
That's true. I think
And
too,
yeah,
in it bringing, so John 3 is like one of my favorites ever, that whole
mhm,
story with Nicodemus. Because I
mhm,
think something we also forget in that is that the way that we live in that is we are born from above, a sort
yeah,
of enlightenment that happens where my
right,
my Eastern understanding is like, oh, Jesus is literally speaking as a guru right now to this guy
exactly.
who thinks he knows the law. And Jesus says,
Hmm.
the wind blows. The same word pneuma for spirit is wind. Wherever the wind blows, that's where the spirit is. And nobody knows which
Yeah,
way it goes. And he says, you must be born from above. It's this
mhm,
enlightenment. I look at eternal life is the ancient Near East understanding of enlightenment. To
yeah,
live in tune with the eternal life is to be awakened by the spirit above. Or I was even talking to a friend. Encinitas is a city right next to us that is super spiritual. So we do a lot of meditation stuff there and everything. And I was telling him about
nice.
set your mind above where Christ is seated, or be born from above. It's literally the higher chakras that we're talking
Hmm.
about here, and the more third eye awakening awareness, of what
Yeah,
the observer sees in this plane of existence, and all this. And it was just like using Jesus
hmm,
as example for, in this case, somebody who was a worship leader who is now like this like uh super new age guy. It's like helping people understand that it is about a sort of true spiritual. I think we've forgotten a lot in Christianity, the really the two aspects of what it is. It's highly spiritual, and it's highly social, and a lot like what you're talking about, like how
yeah,
we, not like social in the terms of like, are you Christian and vote Republican, but like,
right,
how does my life impact and influence human flourishing
yeah,
literally in my neighborhood? What does
hmm,
that mean? And how do I even have the selflessness to do that? Well, probably because I need to be born from above or enlightened to a higher level of
yeah,
consciousness. Like
yeah,
that's really what I think that this Jesus narrative is all about.
yeah,
Um, so, I mean, for me, that's been Reconstruction, that's been like
exactly,
a
exactly.
huge aspect of Reconstruction. Like, and then using a lot of those old terms, like Jesus is your personal Lord and Savior. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like everybody said, and I was so kicking against that and talking shit on that for so long. And then I'm like, oh, like there's some validity in how I approach that now.
Hmm.
Like if someone is a Lord, it's like, oh, this is more of a model of to live under,
Hmm.
and saving from, like, by all means, like I need to save from my lower self, You know, I need saved from my lower false self that is always seeking self-preservation and fear and greed. I need, you know, I do need awaken out of that illusion, you know?
Yeah,
Oh, I guess the model of Jesus does do those things in my life, you know? And it's like,
exactly.
so now I can say those things, and, you know, some Christian friends are like, right on, brother. And I'm like, we don't mean the same thing, but that's okay. You know,
Yeah, exactly. No,
has that been hard for you? Like,
yeah, for
really?
sure. Yeah, because where I am in Asheville, it's um it's a red state.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm in a blue county, so I get the best of both worlds. But red red states are usually a little more conservative. So man, all the time, Bible Belt over here, Southern Baptist. Um, yeah, and but the teachings of Jesus, man, the more I read it, even today, the more I'm surprised of what I missed. It's like you were saying, it's about rising in consciousness.
Hmm.
Yes, but no one can do that if their basic needs aren't met, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're trying to survive, you have no intention, nor can you go to the next level in your conscience.
True.
And so, yeah, it's about evolving in yourself, but also helping others do that as well. And that includes like if there's people starving to death, like if
Yeah.
we want them to evolve, let's take care of their basic needs.
Yes.
And then we can worry about their theology,
Jesus,
right?
in the model of Jesus, right?
Using
He
his teachings.
he
Yeah.
multiplied the bread and the fish because
Yeah.
people came there because they were hungry.
Yeah. And
You
that's the
know?
thing, like people are hungry. He always talks about um, being hungry and being thirsty.
Yes.
And he feeds them spiritually all the time, obviously, especially with a lady at the well, but also like physically, like we can't miss the physical aspects of it because physical everything physical is spiritual, like it's
Yes.
connected. And if you're talking about
It's the manifestation of the spiritual, in my opinion, you know? So,
exactly, and so talking to non-deconstructed conservative people, their whole mentality is has a little bit to do with bettering themselves, their character and the behavior. Obviously, like don't drink, don't smoke, don't cuss, whatever, because the Bible says so. Cool, okay. But ultimately, that doesn't motivate their relationship with God or
right.
with Christ. Their motivation is, I'm only doing this because of what's going to happen after I die.
Hmm.
And the character aspect of it is isn't even a priority to them, really.
Hmm.
If I had a friend who, I don't know if he meant it or not, but he said, if God wasn't real, I would be murdering people left and right. Like that's the only reason why I'm a good person.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh my gosh, dude, this is you don't even understand what's happening in the
Yeah.
Bible if that's your mentality.
Right.
Like it's really not about the afterlife. It's not even about if
It's not
God.
even about necessarily like and not to cut you off, but the
No,
notion
you're
that
good.
without the belief in God that I'm going to cheat on my wife and murder my neighbor is
Exactly.
insane. Like
Yeah.
even in the Old Testament, we see that God has written his law on our hearts. So that
Right.
means it's innate to the
Hmm.
natural being by virtue of being a human. You are
Hmm.
going to act in line in image and likeness of God, left to your
Hmm.
own devices, sometimes for good and sometimes for evil. That's the Tao, right? That's the way
Yeah.
of light and dark within us. But like we have the capability for both. And just to your point, I want you to please continue. I was listening to Alan Watts lecture the other day. I don't know if you ever listen to Alan Watts. He's an old philosopher from
No.
the 60s, but you'd probably dig him. He's awesome. But he was talking about how uh, some clergy were saying how they don't understand how, you know, Buddhists don't just kill people and all this stuff because they don't have a deity
Yeah.
structure. Buddhism does not have a deity structure or
Right.
a
That's a
worship
huge
structure.
misconception. Yeah.
Huge misconception that people are
Mhm.
worshiping Buddha. They're not.
Mhm.
But he's like, and I love his response to that. He said, they just don't do that. Like, he's like,
Oh yeah.
he's like, you know, without that, he's like, plain and simple, that's just not who they are to do those sort of things. And
Yeah.
it's so true. Like the reality is most of us just by nature won't kill our neighbor. We just
Right.
won't do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so I think it's a false rhetoric that you have to have God in order to not be,
Hmm.
you have to have God in order to be a participating member in society. And that's a
Right.
very like old idea for like, especially like turn of the century sort of stuff, is like you would get loans, better loans based on your membership to church. Like
Wow.
everything was connected to this idea of your association to
Hmm.
Christianity and to having faith. You were more trustworthy and all this stuff. As we've known, that being a believer or a pastor or anybody does not give you any more moral credibility. You know,
No. I
we see
mean,
pastors doing stupid shit all the time, you
yeah,
know?
pastors, but also like the history of Christianity with like all the violence and the war, like the evidence just isn't there that
Right.
God makes you a better person. If anything, through history, it's given people the understanding or the illusion that they deserve better than everybody else because God likes them more because
Right.
they choose to believe in this God. And I think it should be the opposite. Like because you love God, you because of that reason you have even more motivation to love those that aren't like you because
Yeah.
that's what God would have done.
Right. That's
Yeah,
and to your point, like Jesus said, the way that you love the least, last, and the lost, did you visit me in prison? Did you clothe
exactly.
me? Did you feed me? You know, you're doing that unto me. That speaks to a whole lot of stuff. But part of my reconstruction to really emphasize that point has been like, oh, understanding that every person I look at, Ram Dass has this saying that, everyone you see is God in drag, you
Oh
know?
yeah,
And essentially that's what Jesus is saying. He is
yeah,
saying, if if you've not done this to them, you have not done it to me. So he's saying every person is Jesus in drag, every
yeah,
single person you see. And if you see someone who is hungry, then that means that you are what you have not done to the least of these, you've not done for me. And part
exactly.
of reconstruction is, I think, understanding this simple value structure that we see through Jesus in the Gospels. And Jesus
Hmm.
actually says some stuff that even he kind of recounts, and people forget the humanity of Jesus. I was
Yeah,
just talking with a friend at breakfast yesterday about, he's like, man, leaders and all these pastors, like they fall and they do this stuff. And, you know, hate to name drop or call people out, but, Carl Lentz, like,
hmm,
Hillsong pastor cheating on his wife and all of this. And I basically said, I think it's because we've over deified Jesus.
right.
And we then, in trying to be that way, over deify ourselves to live up to standards. Nobody
Yeah,
can live up to be God. And we've completely missed the humanity side of Jesus. And we forget actually it was a heresy to only think Jesus was divine, in the
yeah,
400s. Like
yeah.
people were burned alive for that, but like it's accepted now,
Hmm.
we have to remember like that catechism that it's like 100% God, 100% man. If Jesus is both of those things, then we have to embody both of those things within ourselves. And
Yeah,
we need to embrace the human experience as much as the divine experience. And if we aren't looking out for the human experience for every single person, then
yeah,
like what you're saying, we can't invite anyone into the divine experience.
yeah.
uh
A huge. I love another verse. Um, what is the greatest command? Right. And I used to hate Jesus's response because the teachers of the law asked him for one answer, and he like what I thought was a cop out answer, and he gave them two, right? Like
yeah.
what is the greatest command? And he gives them two commands. I'm like, come on, Jesus, like just
uh,
what is the one greatest? Don't give me that. But then the more I grew up, the more I matured in my spirituality, I realized that he really did only give them one answer. And
mm,
so this is the way I see it. And the key word in that verse is when he says equal. So love God is the first command.
yeah.
But then he says equal to that one is to love your neighbor.
Yeah.
And so if it's a math equation, right? A equals B, if you flip it, B equals A.
Yeah.
That's what Jesus was saying here. And so in order to love God, like the only way to do that is to love your neighbor.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, then automatically you are not loving God. You break the equation.
Yeah.
And so it's one answer, but it's two sides of the coin, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that verse, man, that really got me real far in my theology.
Mm.
Everything because that really humanizes God.
Yeah.
Like the the answer to loving God and all that spiritual, metaphysical things that I will never understand, it all really boils down to how we live physically.
Hmm.
Like you can love God, you can say that, sure, but how is that reflected in your everyday life?
How do you embody God to a
Yes,
world? How do it, I think I love that verse also mentioning as yourself, you know?
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
It's as yourself. So it's like
Hmm.
you love yourself as
Hmm.
yourself. You become God in you, Christ
Hmm.
in me, right? That's another like
Yeah,
super metaphysical thing that I've brought out to people as well. Like the
yeah.
mystery hidden beyond the ages is Christ in you, the hope of glory. So you are
Oh,
the
yeah.
embodiment of Christ in the world, right? So
Hmm.
it's Christ is something eternal, not Jesus's last name,
Exactly. Yeah.
enters into us by way of being born from above, enabling us
Hmm.
to love our neighbor and to invite them into this sort of flow,
Yeah.
by way of feeding and, clothing and loving and inviting and teaching, like, hey, this is the
Exactly.
way, this is a way. And Jesus always referred to it as the way,
Yeah.
and it's like, this is a way of being. This is the Tao of life.
Yeah.
And I love that. I listen to a podcast. He's going to come on the show too. He does a podcast called the Dao of Christ, and it's
Okay.
really interesting.
I gotta check that out.
You got to. It's this dude, Marshall Davis, and he's agreed to come on and do an episode with me. But he's this
Nice.
older guy who was like an evangelical pastor for like 40 years and was basically like, I'm just not here for this anymore, and
Wow. Good for him.
he's like definitely more of a mystic at this point, and so
Oh, man.
really interesting. Um, but he talks a lot about the Tao of Christ that is the way and the flow of Jesus, and it's the simple. In my interpretation, it's these simple value systems, the verses that
Hmm.
we've overlooked, and especially I don't know if you went through a season of time where you got really into theology and you were like really
Hmm.
getting in there and dissecting it and everything. You kind of push off the simple teachings of Jesus because you want to like get to the
Hmm.
quote complex things of Christ,
Yeah, I've been
and it's
there.
like, and then you realize this whole like flip upside down thing of like the simple things are the most complex things of the teachings of Jesus,
Yeah, yeah, but you
Uh,
can't get there until you've made that journey.
yes, and
Yeah.
as we wrap up, I think that's the thing is you have to understand, not you necessarily, but for
Hmm.
myself or for our listeners or anyone, like to understand the value of going through process and seasons
Hmm.
of being as sure as you can be about where you're at, questioning at certain times, following that path into nomadic places, entering into some sort of new awareness, living into that, holding on
Yeah.
to, like, it's this cycle of death and rebirth that we see in Jesus and what you know, and
Yeah.
and so what I'm really excited about in my own life is this journey of reconstruction over really the past year that's happened and has catapulted us into wanting to cultivate church again and stuff. Um, and just seeing how that's happening, I think, in the lives of so many people. And my hunch is that we're going to have a lot more people entering into deconstruction, but
Hmm.
I know that maturity will always continue to grow, and we need to have outlets and spaces for
Hmm.
voices like yours, for voices like mine, to be able to give people a path that if they want to reconstruct with Christ
Hmm.
in their narrative, where are the places that can be talking about that? And
Yeah.
so I'm grateful for you, Ray, and grateful for all these folks that want to come on, because even just having these rabbit trailed conversations about this stuff would have been like water, like cool water
Hmm.
on a hot day,
Yeah.
a year ago, whenever I was really seeking, like, well, what does Jesus what part does he really play in all this again? Not just taking it all apart, but what does it look like to incorporate and include this
Mhm.
in a non-reactionary way, you know?
Yeah, I think making it normal
Yeah.
will definitely speed up the process for a lot of people to feel comfortable to take that decision to question and all that. And the more we talk about it, the more people listen, the more
Yeah.
the word gets out that it's okay. It's okay to question. And I think that's going to help a lot of people. And that's just going to multiply. You know, if
Yeah.
one person finds the ability to doubt and then to reconstruct in a healthy way. Two of them will hear that about that, and then four and eight. And at this movement, I think, is going to be either the end of Christianity or it's going to be the beginning of a new way of Jesus.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to use the same name or it's going to be another one, but I think Jesus won't go anywhere. But I think Christianity is definitely heading somewhere else for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's good that we have places of invitation to reconstruct, you know,
Yeah.
for whatever that, if it's, Christianity or not, I've found myself in a sort of reconstructed place where I accept that term again. I
Hmm.
didn't for a long time. And so if anybody's listening, it's okay to not associate with labels are just things that are evidence of what's happening
Hmm.
inside. I mean, the reason you walk down the canned food aisle, which you shouldn't do if you're a real healthy person, but if you do, the reason you see all these labels is they're just evident of what's going on in the contents here. Labels aren't necessarily bad. They help bring identification, and if people aren't digging the Christian label right now, then
Right.
people
Right.
have permission to ditch that and to be free from that.
Yeah.
And I don't, to me, I've adopted that label back into my life um, in nuanced ways, but
Hmm.
I think that I'm open to something else emerging that helps us bring. I use the term like non-dual Christianity a lot.
Yeah.
Um, I've really personally diverted from the term progressive Christianity for a whole lot of reasons. I think I'm going to actually do a thought out. All my episodes, by the way, I just riff and it's not a good
Oh
habit.
no, you're good. You're good.
I need to
That's what
just,
post editing can fix all that. Yeah.
yeah, if I did that, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. So
Oh wow.
I'm just, I
Super
just get
energetic.
excited about things and do things quickly and whatever, you know what I mean?
That's awesome.
So, but I am writing a few, uh, sermons, teaching, for lack of a better term, that I think I'm gonna, because normally I'll
Mhm.
just like get hot on an idea and just riff on it, which is how this episode started. Is another guy like posted that Instagram, he was like answering Instagram questions. I don't know if you saw that on my stories or whatever. I even made a post about it
Mhm.
too, that sparked this whole thing of like this guy basically saying that deconstruction and evangelical people are, it's basically their own problem and they're wrong,
Oh.
and so that's why I recorded that episode. Like, good discipleship includes deconstruction, which was just a riff where I was sitting on the floor over here, you know. Uh, but I'm like, man, I need to, as I approach some of these bigger things, like reformulating faith, like, man, these are really big ideas that people are wrestling with right now, and they deserve more energy and effort and attention and intentionality with.
Hmm.
Um, and they deserve to have, people deserve, I think, to have more content available to them to
Yes.
identify what's happening, you know? And
Hmm.
so whoever may be listening to this, there could be something that you said today that completely was a light bulb for them, that connected a dot. Or maybe they're not even aware it connected a dot, and in 6 months it'll connect a dot. You know what I mean?
That's more likely. Yeah.
More likely.
Yeah.
But I think that I'm just grateful for how many people responded, for people that want to share their own story to help other people that have been through a sort of uh, deconstruction, reconstruction. I love where your heart is at about understanding the words of Jesus, and really appreciate you, being vulnerable and coming on to talk about this stuff, man.
Well, thank you for that. But more props to you because, like you said, you have a lot of work ahead of you, and that's not easy, and that's a lot of help for a lot of people, and not everyone can do that. And one more note on that. Um, One of the reasons why I stuck with Jesus is because I know that narrative.
Mm,
I could have left it. I could have gone to Buddha. I could have gone to the Hindus, whatever, but I didn't, because ultimately the point here is what Jesus calls the new creation.
yeah.
And so, how do we, you or me, influence people to be the best versions of themselves? We can make a new narrative, or we can use the narrative that they already understand
Yeah.
and know. And I think it's a good way, regardless if you think it's true or not. The Bible and Jesus' words is a great way to get a lot of people on the right
Mm.
track. And
Dude,
so I appreciate that.
totally agree. And that's whenever I was venturing and really entering into Hinduism, Taoism, and things, I
Hmm.
had this revelation of I will never know these faith traditions like I know the Christian tradition.
Hmm.
I will never understand the depths of these, if
Yeah.
I convert or, whatever. And it's like, man, I might as well. And thank you for bringing that up, because that was a lot of my embracing again, was like, I might as well make the best sense that I can of this. And as
Hmm.
soon as I made that decision and surrendered to my tradition, it was like, boom, like things just started connecting together in really far out ways.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's something for a lot of people. And I tell people, maybe it's because I was, born in America to a pastor,
Yeah.
in a charismatic faith tradition. Well, I'm going to work with that.
Yeah. I mean, those are
That's
the
what I
cards
got
you
to
were
work
dealt.
with.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
might as well just
And
embrace that.
like, honestly, I think that's what Jesus did. Like, yeah, he was Jewish, but like, was he really?
Right.
Like, I think he used his tradition to do what he did, but I don't think he needed that one. I think he could have
Right.
used whatever. And I think, we should do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think if the goal of a lot of these traditions are the same,
Yes.
and we might as well. And for me, I think what better thing to do than to restore something that people have a complete skewed view of, but
Hmm.
have some familiarity with. I think that's
Exactly.
one of the most fun things that I get to do, is have people over and tell them that I'm a pastor, and you know see their reaction to that, like, okay, but
Yeah.
everyone who's in the Western world, to some degree, has
Hmm.
some level of understanding of who Jesus was, or they went to Easter as a kid, Easter services.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we don't all know, about these ceremonies, to Ganesh. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, or these, like, I went to a meditation thing and we did like a kirtan, which is worship song to Ganesh, and like, I'm like, I don't know any of these words. Like, we're singing in Sanskrit. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Wow.
It will never have the impact in my life
Hmm.
that singing, in my case, some of these old vineyard worship songs will. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like last night we had uh, our gathering, and the song came to me. This old song, like, I'm dry and thirsty, Lord, send your rain. Lord, I need your touch again. Send your rain. And it's like these cheesy old early 90s songs, but it's in a way that I can interpret them that just bring a newness to me, that I
Yeah.
will never know by singing Ganesh chants.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
I get that.
so thank you for bringing that up and allowing me to riff on that.
No, that was good.
No, dude, thank you, man. Thank you. Um, and as we finish this, I'm just curious, any other words that you might have to people that maybe where you were like 18 months ago, 24 months ago, like any sort of thoughts that you might give to them as we end?
Hmm. So many thoughts.
I'm
Um,
sure we could probably do a few more of these.
yeah, yeah. Get some beers involved. We'll go all night.
Yeah.
Um,
My wife's a 9-wing 8, by the way, so that's
oh,
why we
what's
get
up?
along well. So
918. Um, Patience is obviously a must, and knowing that it's okay to be scared, because obviously, I don't think people really understand how much the afterlife is affecting their theology.
Mhm.
And being in limbo about that is scary, but it's okay. I think try to understand how much God loves you,
Mhm.
and regardless of where your theology or ideology takes you, God will love you. Allow yourself to leave this path that was made for you, by other churches and other pastors. Allow yourself to educate yourself. Read all the things, especially the Bible. Um, hear all the podcasts. Just educate yourself. Um, that way, you have a solid foundation of why you believe what you believe. More important, that's more important than believing anything. Just why do you believe, regardless of what it is? Why?
Mhm.
And if
Yeah.
that why makes sense to you, then that's going to allow you to grow, and be the best version of yourself, for sure.
Mm. That's so good. That's so good. People having the ability to say, this makes sense for me. I love that language you just used. That's whenever I first started this podcast, it was the language I was using was helping people form a faith that works for them.
Yeah.
Because so many people form a faith that works a theology that they've been given, or works
Right.
their, cultures, their Christian culture's version of it. It doesn't actually work for
Hmm.
you. And so love the permission to be able to be curious, explore, read all this stuff. I would nuance too, read the stuff that you were told not to read.
Especially those. Yeah.
I mean, everybody told me not to read Rob Bell, Love Wins. And
Right.
the first time that I finally actually did that, I'm like, oh, they were hiding something they didn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
this stuff's beautifully brilliant, and it's like,
Yeah.
read the stuff that's taboo. Read the things you're not allowed to read. Read the guys that have the weird names that would freak your grandma out, like like Ram Dass
Yeah.
and
And the thing
like
is, like, if what you told was, if your um, conservative beliefs are real and they're true, then reading these other books won't affect you. Why are you scared to do it? Just do
right.
it, you know? And, but, honestly, I think they're scared because they do doubt their own beliefs.
That's very
Um,
true.
so if you do doubt it, well, then find something that you don't. Either way, read those books.
And the spirit of truth, that's what I told people. The spirit of truth leads you into all truth, Jesus said.
Yeah.
So how much reliance do you have on self
Hmm.
or on God? Like, I put it back on people who put everything on God. If you tell them they did a good job, and they're like, nope, it was the Lord,
Right.
like, it's like, yeah, he didn't actually play that guitar riff though. You did, it's like,
Yeah. Give yourself some credit.
right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, I just think that people should have that, be able to do that. So, um, man, do you have any creative projects, anything that you want to give spotlight to, anywhere that,
Ooh. Sure. So actually, I do have a podcast, which is why I have all this equipment. It's
nice.
called, yeah, it's called The Bad News.
Okay.
Um, because just a quick overview, the good news of Christ, we all know, right? And we all assume that the good news is for us. But actually, the good news is for the oppressed.
Mm,
And us in America, 21st century, how many of us are actually oppressed, right? And so if we take that back to the first century, those would have been the Romans, right? The Roman soldiers. The good news for the oppressed was actually really bad news for those in power.
mm,
And we are currently living in a time in which we are the ones in power. So the bad news of Jesus is is what it is to us.
mm.
So that's why I call it that. And it's just pretty much just me ranting.
Hey, that's
um,
the best. That's the
yeah,
beauty of podcasting. I mean, people forget, listen, Joe Rogan rants
right.
for 3.5 hours with
People love
people,
it.
and
Yeah.
people love it. And I'm always like worried about time, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I should be as worried about time, but awesome. So the Bad News Podcast,
Hmm.
and people can find that
Wherever
iTunes,
podcast.
anywhere. All
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
sweet. Very cool, man.
Awesome.
Well, Raymundo, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll have another conversation soon.
Awesome. Yeah. If you want it, I'll be here. I'm excited for the rest of the interviews like this. I love impromptu conversations, and because people really say what they mean when
That's
they're on the
true.
spot like that. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm glad you're doing
Yeah,
that.
man. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, my friend.
All right.
So I'll end it there.
Cool.
And this is awesome, dude. This is
Yeah.
fun. This is fun.
I like that.
Let me stop recording.